Hey, and welcome back to Season 2, Episode 12 of the Leading Adam podcast. Today, Adam and I get to sit down with Rebecca Marsh. She's the Director of Social Emotional Learning for the Peace Learning Center. And I know that term, social emotional learning, might make you cringe a little bit, but we get to unpack all the goodness that is and what it's not, and have a great conversation with her. So stay tuned.
The Leading Adam podcast is hosted by me, Adam Binkerd. I've spent the last 10 years researching how a healthy human experience is the key to innovation and student retention and education. And now I'm taking to the mic to share what I've learned. Hear how I've defied the odds and transformed from a landscaper to a national expert in student success in less than 10 years. Not an educator? That's okay. Stay tuned for entertaining stories and practical takeaways about leading self, leading leaders, and leading culture. The Leading Adam podcast is co-hosted by Erika Crabtree, produced by Chris Spangle, and sponsored by 240 Solutions. Connect with us at 240solutions.com. And I hope you'll stay tuned because together we can change the world. Rebecca, nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too.
Thank you for joining us. This is Season 2, Episode 12 for us, and I'm excited about this one. Your guest, your invite here.
I know, this is super exciting. Yeah. Welcome, and thanks for joining us, Rebecca. Adam and I have been doing this podcast here for a little bit and talking all about, the human experience. And we both come from higher education background. And so, most of our audience are educators or, kind of in the education space, but also some who aren't. So, we kind of talk about a lot of things here. But, super excited to have you on with your experiences. And, tell us a little bit. Who's Rebecca? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. Well, before I even got into education, my background was in business. And so I spent many years in the business field, just kind of feeling somewhat lost. And then through my own life experience and some trials, things, ups and downs,
all the things.
I kind of fell upon mindfulness, and really found myself in that and really started to think to myself like, wow, if I had this experience as a child and learned how to sort of manage myself and really become very like self-aware, I really feel like it could have made such a difference in the way that things turned out. Although, 20 years later, things have turned out great. But in that moment, I really was thinking like, I want to teach this to kids. I want to do something with kids where I can have some sort of influence and impact, and teach them about, how to, be themselves and have that self-awareness that took me so long to find. And so I went into education with the intention of becoming a school counselor. But as I entered and I was like, well, I'll just, teach for a few years just to get an idea of how things roll. And I ended up staying in the classroom for 10 years.
Oh, wow. And what age groups did you work with at the time?
I taught elementary. So I started second, looped with them to third, taught third for many years, then went up to fourth. And that's where I ended in the classroom. But I found that you don't need to be a counselor to have an impact on kids' lives above and beyond academics. And so the relationships that I built with my kids and their families was just super profound. And, I really loved what I did. And after, so many years, I was like, okay, it's time for me to take the next step. And the next step for me was to go into social emotional learning, which was a term that I wasn't even aware of when I went into education. I knew that's what I wanted to do. I just didn't know it had a name. And actually at that time, it started to become kind of buzzy. So it was perfect timing. And so once I did realize it had a name, I was like, this is my thing. And so I transitioned to a different school to be in a student support position. Did that for a few years and then landed my dream job as a director of social emotional learning for Peace Learning Center, which is here in Indianapolis. We're located in Eagle Creek Park. So
beautiful area.
Absolutely beautiful surroundings. It's pretty nice getting to, go to work and look out your window and just see the reservoir. And so it's
oh my gosh,
pretty enjoyable.
Yeah.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about Peace Learning Center, just for some more context? Because I know we're going to talk more about social emotional learning, but Peace, what was it called?
Learning Center.
Peace Learning Center.
Yes.
Tell us about that. How is it structured? What's the demographic?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Peace Learning Center has been around since the late 90s, so about 28-ish years. As I mentioned, we're located in Eagle Creek Park. It was founded by Tim Nation, and he co-founded it, but he's currently our executive director and CEO. And the idea, it was originally started as like AmeriCorps. He was working with AmeriCorps folks, and then it sort of transitioned into community education. And so our mission really is to facilitate community education that is a catalyst for peace. And, peace education in itself has many different sort of avenues or definitions. But we really focus on the social emotional learning aspect of it, as well as restorative practices. So a lot of the work we do is with schools. And we go into schools, we help, change the, I'm trying to think of it's no longer prison. It's no longer, school to prison pipeline. I'm trying to think of the correct term, but it's escaping me right now. But really trying to help, eliminate the, excessive amount of detentions, expulsions, suspensions, specifically with, marginalized youth. And the work that I do at Peace Learning Center is really focused on social emotional learning with both youth and adults.
So I was curious, is Peace Learning Center positioned as an alternative to a more traditional school, or do you partner with schools to kind of go in and and both?
It wasn't super clear on that. We're actually a nonprofit organization, so it's not an alternative. It's a support. So it's like a yes and, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So it's like, let's come in, let's help schools with what they're already doing. And that's just part of the work that we do. That's not all of the work. We also host a lot of youth enrichment sessions, formerly called, like field trips, where kids will come out to the center for a day or so, half a day, and just learn about, teamwork and, communication and how to be a good, citizen and how to have relationships with each other and respect each other. And so really teaching, the main component that Peace Learning Center was found upon was conflict resolution. And so everything has sort of built off of conflict resolution. We have programming in peer mediation where we teach kids how to, mediate their peers' conflict, which is so profound if you really think about it. And like kids, helping other kids. If imagine the world that we could live in if that was the reality everywhere. So it's pretty phenomenal work. I love what I do.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's really a dream job.
Yeah. Do you find that schools, do they reach out to Peace Learning Center and say, hey, we need this, or is it?
Yeah. Pretty much. Yes.
So how do they find you?
Yeah. So we have, systems in place. We have a great director of client services that is pretty much the face and, voice of Peace Learning Center who, people will come and reach out. It's a lot of word of mouth, a lot of just experience, a lot of, hey, I came to Peace Learning Center when I was a kid, and this is something that's really, had an impact on me. And then, Tim, like I said, our executive director, he's very connected in the community. And so, like I said, word of mouth. So yeah, it's a lot of folks coming to us and saying like, hey, this is what we're looking for. Or, former partnerships. So it's folks that we've already had partnerships with coming back and saying, hey, this was so great. Now we're having this. Can you come back and help us with this? So yeah, it's Pretty good stuff.
So your passion for social emotional learning is so evident. Whenever you start to even get close to the topic, your affect changes in a positive way. That's exciting. I think a little context, leading Adam is really, we're aiming to help people understand, how do we lead humanity, not just generations or gender or whatever. Like let's transcend all that and let's lead humans, because we all have that in common.
Yeah.
And our primary interest is, how do we teach people to lead humanity in education? And so a lot of our listeners are educators. And I think social emotional learning, as you had said, it was kind of a buzzword there for a while, and it's really simmered down in that regard.
Yeah.
But it is still evident and relevant. But why don't we start by, tell us what social emotional learning is?
Yeah.
And maybe hit some of the things that it isn't.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
I feel like it gets
Please
labeled
let me.
a lot of stuff. So
Yes. Thank you.
let's start there. What isn't social emotional learning?
Start with what it is. Okay. So social emotional learning is basically just the concept of teaching the foundational soft skills that we all need to be successful as humans, right? We all need to have communication skills. We all need to be able to regulate our emotions. We need to have time management, right? All of this is incorporated in social emotional learning. So really there are 5 competencies. So the first one is self-awareness, right? Really being aware of yourself. This is self-efficacy, self-advocacy, self-esteem, confidence, but it's also being able to identify your own emotions. Then there's self-management, which is everything under the sun, including regulating emotions, but it also is executive functioning, right? This is like these basic skills that we all need to not, be successful in our personal and professional lives. These are the skills that workplaces are looking for when they're going out and recruiting, communication skills, time management, organization, right? These are the important skills we need to be successful.
Right.
Social awareness, which is really, there's ethics, there's, diversity, understanding others' perspectives, empathy, and really having a pulse on like social norms. And then there is relationship skills. So that's where, team building, communication, conflict resolution, problem solving. These are such vital skills for every human being, right? To be successful. And then responsible decision making. So this is just, understanding consequences of your behavior and understanding making good choices for yourself and, being aware of your choices and how they affect others. And so, these 5 competencies wrapped up together, when you are focusing on them, individually, and I really like to think of them sort of as a spectrum, and they build upon each other. And all the work that I do and develop in terms of programming really starts with the self. So very intrapersonal work. So it's that self-awareness and that self-management. And then it builds into the more interpersonal, which is like the relationship, right? And then building more into the systemic and the, like the social awareness and responsible decision making. And, that's both interpersonal, that's, across the board. We do that for ourselves. We do that with each other. And then we make responsible decisions for the world around us as well, or as a human in the world around us.
So if we were to ask anybody, we could pull anyone off the street, literally anyone, and ask, do you think it would be a good idea if we taught students how to make good decisions and that there's consequences to the decisions you make? And every human being that has good cognitive connection,
right,
try to be sensitive here, is going to say absolutely. Yeah. Yet there is a visceral reaction to this social emotional learning. In some ways it's like, well, we're not teaching math anymore. We're just teaching how to understand my emotions, which is ridiculous.
Right.
But what is social emotional learning? How is it getting labeled that it's just inappropriate and not correct?
Yeah. So
let me say it more directly. Let's speak to the ignorant people in society.
Okay.
And how is it getting labeled that's just plain ignorance?
I love the way that you put that.
Yeah.
Because at the end of it is, it's just, you don't know what it is, because like you said, if you go to anybody on the street and you ask, like, would you want your child to have effective, executive functioning skills? I think anyone would say, yeah, I do. Mm-hmm. I want my kid to be successful. But if you ask the same question posed as, would you want your kid to have social emotional learning in school? That word visceral is so accurate. No. And it's because there's this concept that like SEL is like therapizing kids, and it's like therapy in school, or it's indoctrination of like, indoctrinate. Gotcha. That word. And
indoctrinating. Gotcha.
And following. And it's, this concept of like, it's a segue to other bigger, things that may or may not be appropriate in schools. But it's not that. That's not what it is. Yeah. What it is it's teaching your kids that when they're struggling in a math problem, how to regulate themselves so that they can effectively work through the problem and help themselves manage, their emotions and not shut down. Right. And so there's so much social emotional learning that is taught throughout the day, and it can be integrated into academics. So it's not that, we're not teaching math anymore. We're teaching math kids. Yes, exactly. Right. We're teaching kids how to function when things get hard, or when things get outside of their comfort zone.
Based on your, like what you've seen in your experience, we just had a fantastic conversation with Jillian Gilbert, who has done a lot of work with just multi-generational students and things like that. And we were talking about like boomers versus Gen X versus, now Gen Z and Gen Alpha coming up. And I hearing you say that, like with math and how to regulate those emotions, do you see that? I'm curious, like is it the parent who's like, that's woo woo, like you're teaching my kid, like what is that? In my day, it's just you do it, and then of that philosophy of like you just don't question it, like it's it's just the expectation there is you do it and you don't have emotions about it.
Yeah,
but we know these generations, especially Gen Z and Gen Alpha, there is emotions, connected with that. Like what, kind of where do you think that comes
and I
from?
think, and that's part of like, right. Cause SEL wasn't a thing when we were kids, right? We didn't talk about it. We didn't learn about that stuff in school. We just did it. But there's so much, education has changed, as we all know, right? So much, specifically in the last 20 years. And what we're asking of kids and what we're expecting of kids has changed. And so I think when we are, really pushing rigor and we're really pushing, we also have to support them in that. And, and so I think that's sort of where like the SEL started to come from. I'm not sure if you're familiar with CASEL, which is the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning. They're like the big guru of, SEL, and they've been around 25, 30 years. But yeah, I mean, like they were so, the trailblazers, ahead of their time with understanding that. I think, just our generations are evolving. And so I think we need to evolve with them. And I think as humans now more than ever, we need compassion and we need empathy, and we need to be teaching our kids how to show compassion and empathy, and also have compassion and empathy for themselves.
Yeah. And it's still, again, it's so interesting because if you were to ask someone, do you think that we should teach kids, anyone really, to empathize? And everybody's going to say yes.
Yeah.
But as soon as you use this label, it changes it. And
is there a yes, but that's not spoken though?
Well, I think so. I think there probably is. And, I think the biggest culprit is Gen X. I can say that because That's where we come from. Because, we rage against the machine kind of a thing.
Right.
But the reality of it, I think what we're failing to accept is how social media, but not just social media, technology in general has changed our brains. And so where, like you've said it a few times, that, we just learned it. We just did it. Well, we did just do it, and we were learning it. We learned how to regulate emotions. I remember conflicts between my friends that we all just got involved to help. But that's not happening today. And when you understand the neuroscience behind it, there is a reason for that. And it does take a specific pull. Let's pull it over here and kind of detox for a minute. And now let's build the neuropaths that help us with emotional regulation, conflict resolution, executive functioning.
Yeah.
That's a part that I think we're oversimplifying it. And so, they need to learn empathy, but they need to just learn it in the sandbox.
Right.
Well, there's no sandbox anymore.
Right.
The world is different today, and what generations, especially Gen Z, Gen Alpha, are experiencing is so much different that those of us, unless you've studied it, X and older, we just don't understand it at all. It's so foreign to us. And we just think, well, they just need a good old-fashioned butt whooping.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Well, maybe.
Right.
But,
right. Yeah, maybe.
But we maybe ought to ask them how they feel, too.
Right. Right.
Nobody's processing that with them.
That is so true. And that brings me to, I developed, in my time still as a classroom teacher, I developed a program for parents, which was it was just SEL for parents, open to the community in which I was working in, and caregivers, anyone was really welcome. Anyone that was a vital part of our kids' lives. And the reason I did that was because I was seeing that disconnect, right? Because we're trying to teach our kids with the social emotional learning curriculums that we have in our schools, or, beyond, in just the relationships that we're building with our kids. And what we're telling and how we're teaching conflict resolution, through like verbal communication and empathy and understanding and perspective. And we're going against, my mom said that if somebody hits me, I hit them back. And that's old school, right? Like that's our generation. And so it's sort of trying to undo that, understanding, having the parents, like you said, maybe a good butt whooping is in order, but also let's also try to connect on a human level.
Yeah.
And so that's really what started to generate my passion for adult SEL as well, because I'm starting to see like, we can do all this work with the kids, but if it's not getting reinforced 360 degrees, every adult in their life is reinforcing this. So this just becomes normal for them. Yeah. It's not as effective. And so, it's a different world that we live in. And social media has been something that I think has taken away a lot of that humanity and like that, the real human connection for these younger generations. And so now more than ever, it's, so important that we're teaching these, human connection skills.
And what does that look like, working with kids? We'll get into, I'm excited to hear what you've learned about, in terms of working with adults, but like working with kids, like what does that look like? How do you teach somebody to be empathetic and all of those things that you talked about?
The best way that I found to do it was through modeling. And so while I had these curriculums that I used, I used the curriculum as like the entry point, right? To like maybe define the words or like find examples or whatever. But the most effective part was to find opportunities throughout the day, throughout our conversations, in lessons, connecting it to the books that we're reading, and modeling it or pulling out examples of it in real life. For me, through all, the work that I had done prior to becoming an educator and really becoming very self-aware and emotionally intelligent, I was able to model that for my kids. So if I was getting escalated, I would tell them, I need a minute. I'm feeling frustrated right now, and really showing them how I label my emotion and how and model for them in front of, like, how to regulate myself, and was very open and honest with them about my feelings. And and also so that they never felt like, that they were to blame for any of it, or like taking full ownership for, these are my feelings, and and I'm just feeling frustrated right now, so let's take a 5-minute breather because things are getting escalated, whatever it might be.
And I would imagine through that, like, you're creating a space where they can feel vulnerable and say,
Yep.
Okay,
yes,
I feel the same way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which circle back to kind of our generation, how we were raised. In episode 10, we had Roger Younts was on with a student from his school, and they were talking about how they integrate twice a week. They integrate a thing called family time, where they start the day with this, and they talk about all kinds of subjects, from money management to some hot social politics. And they just really kind of all center around and talk about it. And I said, well, why? Doesn't this interrupt your day? Doesn't this impede the learning? He said, it doesn't impede the learning. It enhances it. And he said, Adam, the difference is when we were growing up, we sat at the dinner table every night and we had conversations and we talked about our day. And you end up talking about what went wrong, what didn't go wrong. And that is when you remove that, is what he was saying, there's a void there. And they're taking time in their day and the way they start a couple of days a week to kind of reintegrate the dinner table, if you will.
I love that.
And I think in a lot of ways, social emotional learning can be viewed that way.
Sure.
Like it needs to fill a void that used to exist differently because society operated differently. We're not sitting down at dinner. 90% of families are not sitting down at dinner together anymore. And so there's this absence of cross-generational conversation. Let me glean from your wisdom. Let me share the challenges I'm having. That's not 100%. There.
Yep.
And social emotional learning is kind of bridging that in a way.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's serving
Absolutely.
a purpose.
It absolutely is.
Interesting that educational space is the one that filling that void. Seems like that responsibility, because outside of home and family, that's where kids are spending the most time.
And to go back to that question about, like the ignorance and that visceral response, and a lot of that comes from, well, this should be happening in the home. Like, parents should be teaching this. You're right. It should, and they should, but it's not. In so many households, it's not. And so while those who are, opposed for whatever reason have that strong feeling, that might be your experience, but your experience isn't the human experience, right? It's not what everyone is feeling and what everyone is experiencing. And so to be equitable and to, make sure that we are developing a society that's well-rounded in giving everyone the opportunity to understand this and have these experiences to talk about their day, and maybe, there's some kids that don't have that opportunity to do it at the dinner table. So if it's with their teacher, or if it's with somebody after school or whatever that might be, they're still getting that experience. But, there's nothing as valuable. Well, I won't say nothing. That's a strong word. But that dinner time conversation is so profound.
Yeah.
And it's just really a shame that it has, gone the way that it has. Because when you talk to folks that are experts in, parenting, and they'll say like that dinner time conversation is so important. So, it is. It's sort of the substitute.
So I know that because we've heard from them, get messages or encouragement or whatever. We have listeners ranging from Gen Z to Boomer. And so I think we would be remiss to not try to bring some balance to this. And so I want to pose a quote that's been really profound to me. I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Sure.
So Todd Wilson said, don't allow the pursuit of self-awareness to become a prison of self-consciousness. I think this this is relevant to this conversation, and I'm curious what you think about this. Having been someone who's pressed down the path of learning emotional intelligence, self-awareness, self-regulation, right? We're kindred spirits in this, and I think it's why it was so profound for me. So I'll say it again, and I want to hear your thoughts. Don't allow the pursuit of self-awareness to become a prison of self-consciousness. What does that mean to you?
I think like the word that comes to mind is like overthinking, right? Like, so maybe like don't overthink things and don't try to be don't let this journey of striving to be something take over the present, right? And like this like current mind of who you are. You know, because I think sometimes we become so involved in this like pursuit of happiness or self-awareness or whatever it might be that we lose track of our goal and the why for it.
Sure.
And so I think the journey is the destination, right? Like it that's so often that we're thinking like, oh, we have to do this to get to this space without thinking of like, this is actually, this journey of becoming this is actually what's making me become who I strive to be. Does that, you know, I'm not sure if that sort of makes sense or answers your question.
No, I think it does. It's getting to it. And you saw me looking through my phone because I heard this quote. It's in a book that Todd Wilson wrote, and I wrote it down. I was looking for it in my notes. And the reason I was looking for it is because it resonated with me so massively. Because I think the pursuit of trying to, for me, of self-awareness and trying to go, what am I feeling? What am I really feeling right now? Put me in a prison all of its own. Instead of, in some ways, what before that journey started for me, I would feel angry and I would be angry. And then I went through a season where I feel angry, but what am I really?
Yeah.
Right? Am I disappointed? Am I hurt? Am I lonely? And that is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. But punching a bag or something to release the endorphins of anger is also a good thing. And I think that the risk, because we're talking about there, I'm a huge fan of this idea of the concepts in social emotional learning. I don't use those terms very often because, again, it creates such a brain barrier for people.
Yes.
But I'm a huge advocate for that. These components in there. But I'm also aware of the risk because I've seen it in my own life.
Sure.
Where it is created an action in me. I'm sitting too long thinking about what I feel, what I think, and how the world around me is going to respond to that instead of getting off of my butt and going and doing something and risking failure, right? Risking another emotion that I'm going to have to unpack.
Yeah.
And so that I wanted to kind of bring it in. I think you're right. It's the journey is the destination. And I think I got caught trying to arrive instead of just realizing that, no, this is a part of the thing, but I still got to move. I still got to act and do in life. And I just don't want our listeners to go, oh, great. Someone else thumping the drum about how we all to sit around, hold hands, and sing Kumbaya.
Yeah,
that's not what you're saying.
Yes, it's not. And that's what I said. That overthinking was the first word that came to my mind because it don't overthink it. You know, I saw something so great. I wish I had saved it the other day on social media about each feeling and the purpose of that feelings hold and understanding the purpose of these feelings. And so, for example, anger is a catalyst for change. And so, you know, however you manage it, and the goal isn't to like suppress these emotions or sit around and like say, oh, I'm angry and be happy about it, right? It's to understand it and place those emotions and feelings somewhere productive or somewhere healthy, right? It's understanding them and understanding their purpose because all feelings have purpose. Yeah. And so that's the concept here is not like sit around and, you know, kumbaya. Yeah. You know, it's understanding what the purpose of what you're feeling, like what is it going to be? What is it, this trajectory? Where is it going to,
It can be a motivator.
Exactly. Yeah. Where is it going to push you to?
Yeah.
And I like what you said. I mean, just describing your feelings about like you feel angry, so then you were angry, but also having kind of a higher level understanding of being able to break that down into more nuances. And what the work I think that you do, part of what is so important about it is you're giving vocabulary to it and something that couldn't be named. And now you're being able to say, okay, I feel angry, but it's also because I'm frustrated or disappointed, or there's all these like nuances of emotions that you learn how to manage and sort of address and function, understanding why and feeling those things.
So you have taken this journey yourself, and we like to remind everyone, time flies when we're having fun.
Right.
And we are at our time, but we like to land with something practical. You've
Sure.
taken the journey. If someone listening is going, okay, where do I start? What do you say?
It starts with self, right? And so mindfulness is a great place to start. And mindfulness, in the very literal sense of what it is just being aware in the moment. Just be aware. Be aware of yourself. Be aware of your physical sensations. Be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of those emotions and their purpose. Anger can be mislabeled as frustration. And if you mislabel it and you're frustrated with something, you're not actually dealing with that frustration, right? There's a purpose there. And so the practice of mindfulness and really just becoming aware. And the more you do it, the more you practice it. And it looks so different in so many ways. It could be journaling. It can be just, breath work. It can be, just being conscious of nature. There's so many different elements of mindfulness. And so that's where I started. That's what, propelled me into the work that I do. And it's what's kept me grounded in the work. And so I think, when you are aware, that's the best place to start.
Yeah, I love that. And I will say my thank you and then give it to Erika. Thank you for what you're doing, your passion, your ability to articulate what it is. To me, I'm taking away every emotion has a purpose. Never thought about it like that before. And that's definitely what I'm walking away with.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you. I've been fangirling your passion for this for like a decade now. So
I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so that's what I'm excited we had a chance to reconnect and thanks for joining us here. It's been
this was so fun.
Amazing.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us here at the Leading Adam podcast. We hope you found inspiration and hope to see you again next time. Leave us a comment on YouTube, or if you have an idea for a future episode, let us know that too. You can connect with us at 240solutions.com. Thanks, and we hope to see you again next time.